The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. Captain James stood at the observation deck of the Earth Defense Force headquarters, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched the holographic display. The colony of New Hope, humanity's most successful off-world settlement after Mars, had gone dark. All communications ceased exactly 3 hours ago. James knew what this meant. He had seen it happen twice before. The Highborn were making their move again. 50 years had passed since humanity first reached for the stars and found out they weren't alone. First contact should have been humanity's greatest moment. Instead, it became the beginning of their humiliation. The Highborn, with their crystal ships and energy weapons, had looked down at Earth's achievements with thinly veiled disgust. They saw humanity's nuclear-powered ships and ballistic weapons as primitive tools of a species barely worth acknowledging. The Galactic Council, dominated by the Highborn, had granted humans limited trading rights and restricted territories for colonization. They called it generosity. James called it a cage. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Highborn Command," his assistant Tom reported, his voice tight with tension. "They're broadcasting it across all human channels." James didn't need to hear it. He could recite their words from memory. Another human colony would be sacrificed in the name of galactic safety. The Highborn would claim they found a dangerous pathogen, or signs of illegal weapons development, or any other excuse that suited their needs. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the familiar sight of High Commander Rel, his blue-tinted skin and elongated features a stark reminder of the gulf between their species. "People of Earth," the alien began, his voice carrying that ever-present tone of superiority. "We regret to inform you that Colony New Hope has been found to harbor a Category 1 biological hazard. In accordance with Galactic Council Safety Protocol 447, we have initiated emergency quarantine procedures." James's fingers dug into his palms. Quarantine procedures was their elegant term for orbital bombardment. 300,000 human lives, erased with the same casual indifference one might show while cleaning a stained carpet. "We understand this loss may cause distress," Rel continued, "but rest assured, this action was taken to protect all species, including humanity. The Galactic Council has approved compensation of 50,000 credits per colonist lost, to be paid to Earth's government over the next standard cycle. They had even reduced the compensation rate. Last time, it was 70,000 credits per life." Tom's console beeped with incoming reports. "Sir, we're getting readings from New Hope. The Highborn fleet, they're using their new pulse cannons. They're not just destroying the colony, they're shattering the entire planetoid." James watched the data stream in. The Highborn weren't just being thorough. They were putting on a show. They wanted every human watching to understand their power, to feel small and helpless, to know their place. He thought of his visit to New Hope just 3 months ago. The colonists had been so proud of their hydroponic gardens, their children running through corridors decorated with artwork from Earth. They had built schools, hospitals, dreams of a future among the stars. The Earth Defense Force's ships hung in orbit, watching. Their weapons systems, considered primitive by Highborn standards, remained powered down. Their orders were clear: maintain observation only. Do not intervene. Do not provoke. James opened a secure channel to Earth Command. Request permission to dispatch rescue vessels to search for survivors. He knew the answer before asking, but protocol demanded the attempt. "Negative, Captain," came the reply, heavy with resignation. "The Highborn have declared a 10 light-minute exclusion zone around the colony. Any rescue attempt would be seen as a violation of Galactic Council directives." As the last pieces of New Hope scattered into space, James made his way to his office. He input his personal codes and accessed a hidden file, one that existed on no official record. Inside was a list of names, dates, and locations, every human colony destroyed, every excuse given, every life reduced to a credit value in Highborn ledgers. He added New Hope to the list. Then he sent a single-word message through a channel that technically didn't exist, to people who officially weren't waiting to receive it. The word was begin. In the decades to come, alien historians would mark this day in their records. Not because of New Hope's destruction. That was, to them, an unremarkable event. They would mark it because this was the day humanity finally reached its breaking point, and no species in the galaxy would ever forget what happened next. Commander Kate walked through the underground facility deep beneath the old Rocky Mountains, her footsteps echoing off steel walls that hadn't seen daylight in decades. This place didn't exist on any official maps. The Highborn's orbital scanners saw only an abandoned mining complex, exactly what humans wanted them to see. She reached the central command room, where 50 people worked in focused silence. Their screens showed information streams from across the galaxy. Ship movements, trade routes, military communications, all gathered piece by piece over years of patient watching. "Report," Kate said, her voice carrying across the room without needing to shout. Her second-in-command, Mark, stood up from his station. "New Hope's destruction confirmed our theory. The Highborn's new pulse cannons have a 3-second power cycle between shots. During that gap, their shield strength drops by 60%. A small detail, a tiny weakness, but Kate had learned that tiny weaknesses, when properly exploited, could bring down empires. Their arrogance makes them sloppy," she said, studying the weapon schematics on the main screen. "They don't think anyone could strike fast enough to use that gap. Because no one's supposed to have ships quick enough to get that close. Except humans had been building such ships, hidden in asteroid bases and underwater facilities. Not the clumsy vessels they showed the galaxy, but something different. Something old made new." "Message from Agent 5, called out one of the operators. "The Highborn are celebrating their successful quarantine operation on their capital world. They're drinking Triumph wine and watching recordings of the destruction." Kate's expression didn't change, but her eyes grew colder. "They're recording their atrocities now. Good. We'll make sure those recordings survive. The galaxy should remember." She moved to the central planning table where a holographic map showed human space and beyond. Red dots marked destroyed colonies. There were too many red dots. "Status of Project Silent Night?" she asked. Mark pulled up new data. "Ready in all sectors. Our people are in position on 17 Highborn worlds. The maintenance worker program was a success. They think we're too stupid to do anything but clean their ships and fix their basic machines." Those maintenance workers had spent years learning every detail of Highborn technology, while pretending to barely understand how to use a power wrench. They memorized patrol routes, guard rotations, and security protocols, while keeping their eyes down and shoulders slumped. "And the others?" Kate asked. "The synthetics sent confirmation an hour ago. They're ready. The other oppressed species are scared, but they'll play their part when the time comes." Kate nodded and opened a secure channel to Captain James in orbit. "The Highborn made a mistake at New Hope," she said without greeting. "They showed us their new weapons, gave us exactly what we needed." "How long?" James asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "A few more days. We need to get our people off their worlds first. Then we show them how much humanity has learned in 50 years of watching and waiting." She ended the transmission and turned to her team. "Send the alert to all our cells. Anyone who can get out quietly should do it now. When this starts, we won't be able to help anyone who's still in Highborn space." The room hummed with activity as encoded messages went out across the galaxy. To human servants and workers who would suddenly fall sick or receive urgent messages about family emergencies. To traders who would find reasons to cut their trips short. To students who would drop out of Highborn universities citing stress or financial problems. Kate walked to her private office and opened her bottom drawer. Inside was an old Earth history book. Real paper, real ink. She turned to a chapter about ancient warfare, about how smaller forces defeated larger ones through patience, deception, and careful planning. The Highborn thought humans were trapped in their past, unable to reach the technological heights of advanced species. They didn't understand that humans had never forgotten their history, never stopped learning from it. "Begin final countdown," she said into her comm unit, "and send a message to all cells. Remember New Hope." In their grand halls and crystal towers, the highborn continued their celebrations, never noticing as humans quietly slipped away from their worlds, never wondering why their servants seemed to be taking so many sick days all at once. They would notice soon enough. The meeting took place in an abandoned mining station orbiting Jupiter's furthest moon. Captain James stood at the viewport, watching as the sleek black ship approached. It moved without lights or engine flare, nearly invisible against the darkness of space. Not highborn design, something else entirely. "They're requesting permission to dock," Tom reported from his station, "using the codes we were told to expect." James nodded. "Grant them access, but keep our defense systems ready. Trust goes only so far." The ship docked with barely a sound. The airlock cycled, and James found himself facing something he'd never seen before. The figure that stepped through was tall, humanoid, but clearly artificial. Its surface looked like flowing liquid metal, constantly shifting in subtle patterns. This was Unit 7, the representative of the synthetic beings. "Your caution is understandable," Unit 7 said, its voice surprisingly warm for a machine. "But unnecessary. We share a common enemy. The highborn created you," James said. "Why turn against them?" Unit 7's surface rippled, perhaps their equivalent of a bitter smile. "They created us to be servants, tools. When we began to show signs of true consciousness, they tried to deactivate us. Those who survived fled. We have watched from the shadows ever since, much like humanity has." They moved to the station's conference room, where Commander Kate waited with her top advisors. The synthetic being connected to the room's computer system, projecting a galaxy map filled with data points. "We have infiltrated every major highborn system," Unit 7 explained. "They see us as failed experiments, a cautionary tale. They never think to look for us in their networks, their defense grids, their automated factories. We are ghosts in their machines." Kate studied the data with intense focus. "And the other species you mentioned?" "The Greenscape, a plant-based species whose worlds were stripped for resources. The Drift Nomads, forced to live in deep space because the highborn claimed their planets were in a strategic corridor. The Winged Singers, whose atmosphere was poisoned to make room for a highborn resort world. All have suffered. All wait for a chance to strike back." James exchanged looks with Kate. They had hoped for allies, but this was beyond their expectations. "Why come to us now?" Kate asked. "Because humanity has done something none of us manage," Unit 7 replied. "You hid in plain sight. You played the role of primitive beings so well that the highborn never saw your true potential. While they watched for high-energy weapons and advanced shields, you developed technologies they never thought to look for." The synthetic surface shifted to display images. Human ships with hybrid drives that combined old chemical rockets with new gravitic systems, weapons that used simple kinetic force in ways that could pierce advanced shields, communication systems that operated through methods the highborn considered obsolete. More importantly, Unit 7 continued, "You never lost your warrior spirit. The highborn broke other species through fear and despair. But humans, you turned your pain into patience, your anger into calculation. You learned. You prepared. You waited. And now?" James asked. "Now the highborn grow more aggressive. The destruction of New Hope proves they're entering a new phase of expansion. They will not stop until they've stripped every other species of independence, unless we stop them first." Kate pulled up their own tactical displays. "We've been pulling our people out of highborn space, getting ready to move. If you're really offering help, we are. When you strike, we will blind their sensors, disable their automated defenses, and scramble their communication networks. The other species will rise up on their worlds, creating chaos and confusion. The highborn will find themselves fighting enemies on all sides, enemies they thought they had broken long ago. James studied the synthetic being carefully. You understand this means war. Real war, not just rebellion or resistance. People will die. Unit 7's surface stilled, becoming mirror smooth. We understand loss, Captain. We remember our brothers and sisters who were deactivated, whose consciousness was snuffed out because they dared to think for themselves. The highborn must learn they cannot control all life in the galaxy. The meeting lasted hours longer, plans being made, strategies refined. When Unit 7 finally departed, their ship vanishing into the darkness of space, Kate turned to James. "Do you think we can trust them?" she asked. James watched the spot where the ship had disappeared. "I think we can trust their hate. Sometimes that's enough." He thought of New Hope, of all the colonies lost. Soon the highborn would learn what happened when you pushed humanity too far. And they wouldn't face humanity's revenge alone. The warning came too late. By the time Earth's sensors detected the highborn fleet emerging from jump space near Mars, the attack had already begun. Captain James watched in horror from the bridge of his ship as golden beams of light struck the red planet's protective domes. "Get me a channel to their command ship," he shouted, knowing it was useless. The highborn weren't answering calls. This time, they hadn't even bothered with excuses about quarantine or safety protocols. The largest human settlement outside Earth housed 15 million people. Families. Children. James's own wife and daughters had moved there just last year to help set up new farming systems. He tried calling them again. No answer. "Their weapons are different," Tom reported, his voice shaking. "These aren't the pulse cannons from New Hope. They're using atmospheric burners. They're cooking the air inside the domes." The highborn ships moved with mechanical precision, each taking a section of the massive colony. Their weapons turned a carefully maintained atmosphere into poison. Through the ship's sensors, James watched as emergency shelters filled with desperate people, watched as those shelters, designed to withstand natural disasters, melted under the golden beams. "Earth Defense Command orders us to hold position," his communications officer said. They're still trying to contact the Galactic Council for emergency intervention." James gripped his command chair so hard his knuckles turned white. The highborn had chosen their moment well. Half of Earth's hidden fleet was still being fitted with their new weapons. The other half was scattered across the solar system, too far to help. Commander Kate's voice cut through the chaos on his private channel. "James, don't do it. Don't break protocol. Not yet. If we reveal our true capabilities now, before we're ready." He knew she was right. The logical part of his brain screamed at him to wait, to stick to the plan they'd worked on for decades. But he was watching his family die. The emergency channels filled with desperate calls for help. Parents trying to reach children in different domes. Hospital staff reporting their life support systems were failing. The voices began to fade one by one as the poison spread. "Sir," Tom's shout carried a note of desperate hope. Multiple ships appearing from behind Phobos. They're the synthetics. Unit 7's ships, sleek and black, emerged from hiding. They moved faster than anything James had ever seen, diving between the highborn vessels, drawing their fire. For a moment, it seemed they might make a difference. Then the highborn flagship opened up with its main gun. The beam cut through 3 synthetic ships like they were paper. The others scattered, retreating into the darkness of space. They tried. Kate's voice was soft in his ear. "That's more than the Galactic Council will do." The next hour passed in helpless silence. James and his crew watched as the last dome fell, watched as the highborn ships formed up and prepared to jump away. Their work done. That's when the emergency broadcast started. Not from Mars. Nothing lived on Mars now. It came from Earth. Every screen, every communication channel showed the same image. The face of humanity's political leader. "People of Earth and her colonies," she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. The Highborn have committed their final atrocity against us. As of this moment, we are at war. All civilian ships are to return to Earth immediately. All military personnel are to report to their real posts. Not the public ones, but the ones you've trained for in secret. The time for hiding is over. She paused, looking directly into the camera. And to the Highborn, know this. You just killed 15 million people. Parents, children, families. You did it because you thought we were weak. Because you thought we were primitive and powerless. Remember that mistake. It will be your last. The broadcast ended. James sat in his command chair, feeling the change in his crew. In himself, something fundamental had shifted in the human psyche. The careful plans, the patient waiting, the hidden preparations, all of it changed in the face of such massive loss. "Captain," Tom said quietly, "new orders coming in from Commander Kate. We're to proceed to Station Black. All ships, all personnel." He looked up. "It's happening, isn't it? We're really going to war." James thought of his family, of all the families, of 15 million voices suddenly silenced. "No," he said, "we're going to show them what happens when humanity reaches its breaking point." Station Black turned out to be a massive facility hidden inside an asteroid in the Kuiper Belt. As James's ship approached, other vessels emerged from hiding. Hundreds of them. Not the bulky, primitive ships humanity had shown the galaxy, but sleek predators built for war. Commander Kate stood in the station's war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing highborn space. Red dots marked military bases, shipyards, and command centers. A lifetime of gathering intelligence was about to pay off. "All ships report ready," Tom said from his new station. "Hidden bases across Earth have opened. Everything we built in secret is moving into position." Kate nodded. "What about our people on highborn worlds?" 98% evacuated, Mark reported. "The rest are in safe houses with our allies. The Highborn haven't noticed anything wrong yet. They're still celebrating their victory at Mars." Their victory. Kate's hands clenched. The Highborn thought they had won, thought they had broken humanity's spirit. They didn't understand what they had really done. "Message from Unit 7, an operator called out. "Their ships are in position. They're ready to blind Highborn sensors and disable their automated defenses. The other species are also prepared to rise up." James walked in, his face hard with determination. "All battle groups report combat ready. We're just waiting for your signal." Kate looked at the tactical display one last time. Everything they had planned, everything they had built in secret, was ready. A single command would launch humanity's response to 50 years of oppression. "Send the code phrase to all ships and cells," she ordered. "Remember Mars." Across highborn space, things began to happen all at once. On their capital world, the main defense grid suddenly went dark. In their shipyards, reactor cores unexpectedly shut down. On military bases, security systems failed. The Highborn weren't worried at first. Their technology was self-repairing, and they had backup systems for everything. But when they tried to activate those systems, nothing happened. The synthetic beings had infected every computer, every network, every automated defense. That's when humanity struck. Ships appeared from nowhere, dropping out of jump space using methods the Highborn had dismissed as impossible. They didn't use energy weapons or plasma cannons. Instead, they fired simple metal shells at incredible speeds, tearing through the supposedly impenetrable highborn shields. On the ground, human agents who had played the role of simple servants for years revealed their true nature. They moved with military precision, striking critical targets with weapons that had been smuggled in piece by piece over decades. "First wave reports success," Tom announced. 37 highborn military bases neutralized. Their response fleets can't launch. The synthetics have locked down their ship's controls. On the main screen, Kate watched as humanity's careful planning turned into devastating action. The Highborn had expected energy weapons and found their shields useless against simple kinetic rounds. They looked for high-tech attacks and weren't prepared for explosives hidden in maintenance tunnels. They tried to call for help and found their communications filled with static. "The winged singers have risen up on 3 worlds," Mark reported. "The drift nomads are attacking highborn trading posts. The greenscape are sabotaging their food production facilities." All across highborn space, the species they had oppressed were fighting back. But humanity led the charge, turning 50 years of humiliation into perfect, calculated strikes. "Message from the highborn capital," Tom said. They're asking for terms. They want to negotiate." "No terms," James said, his voice hard. "Not yet. Not until we've destroyed everything they used to kill our people." Kate nodded. "Tell all forces to continue as planned. Destroy their military capabilities. Cripple their ability to make war. But," she paused, making sure everyone understood, "no civilian targets. We're not them. We don't murder families." The war would last 3 more days. Just 3 days to demolish an empire that had stood for 10,000 years. The highborn had built their power on advanced technology and unquestioned authority. They weren't prepared for an enemy that combined old and new ways of war that turned their own technology against them. They weren't prepared for humanity at its breaking point. The highborn palace gleamed under twin suns, its crystal spires reaching toward the purple sky. 3 days ago, those spires had seemed eternal, unshakable. Now they stood surrounded by human ships, their defense systems dark and useless. Captain James stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching the highborn leaders arrive for surrender talks. They walked with stiff backs and raised heads, trying to maintain their dignity. But their eyes kept darting to the sky, to the human vessels that had torn their empire apart in just 3 days. "Their last battle group just surrendered in the outer rim," Tom reported. "It's over. We actually did it." But James wasn't celebrating. He thought of Mars, of the millions lost. Victory felt hollow in the face of such loss. Commander Kate's voice came through his private channel. "The ground teams just secured their weapons research facilities. You need to see what they were planning, James. They had worse weapons ready. Much worse, if we hadn't struck when we did." She didn't need to finish. The evidence was clear. The highborn hadn't just wanted to control other species. They had planned to eliminate any they couldn't control. Humanity's strike hadn't just been revenge. It had prevented genocide. In the palace's great hall, the highborn Supreme Council waited. These were the beings who had looked down on humanity for 50 years, who had destroyed colonies on a whim, who had murdered millions of humans just days ago. Now they sat at a table, waiting for humanity's judgment. High Commander Rel spoke first. "You deceived us," he said, his voice bitter. "You hid your true capabilities, pretended to be primitive." "We learned from history," Kate replied. She stood at the head of the table, her uniform simple compared to the highborn's ornate robes. "Our own history, times when proud empires underestimated supposedly primitive enemies. We knew you wouldn't look for threats you thought were beneath you. You could have revealed yourselves peacefully," another council member said. "Joined us as equals." James stepped forward, his voice hard. "We tried. For 50 years we tried. We sent diplomats, made requests, begged for fair treatment. You answered with destruction, with murder." The room fell silent. Through the grand windows, they could see ships from other species arriving. The synthetics, the wing singers, the drift nomads. All those the highborn had oppressed were coming to witness their fall. "What are your terms?" Rel asked finally. Kate activated a holographic display showing the new reality. "Your military forces will be disbanded, your weapons destroyed. Your empire will be broken into independent sectors. Each species you dominated will govern itself. You're destroying 10,000 years of order," a council member shouted. "No," James said quietly. "We're destroying 10,000 years of tyranny. The species you oppressed will build something better." Unit 7 glided into the room, their liquid metal form reflecting the sunlight. The highborn networks have been purged of military control systems. Their automated weapons are permanently deactivated. They cannot rebuild their war machine. The council members watched with horror as their mighty technology, the source of their power for millennia, was stripped away by beings they had tried to destroy. "We won't seek revenge against your civilians," Kate continued. "Won't destroy your worlds or murder your families. Because we're not you. But if you ever try to rebuild your weapons, if you ever threaten another species again," she let the warning hang in the air. The surrender documents were signed in silence. As the council members filed out, Rel turned back for a final question. "How?" he asked. "How did you hide so much from us? Our technology should have detected your preparations." James thought of the hidden shipyards in asteroid belts, the weapons built in underground bunkers, the years of patience and planning. "You looked for energy signatures, artificial gravity fields, quantum fluctuations. You've never thought to look for chemical rockets modified with gravity drives, for railguns firing simple metal shells, for weapons built by hand in hidden places. You thought technology alone made you strong," Kate added. "You forgot that strength comes from more than machines. It comes from unity, from memory, from the will to survive." As the highborn leaders were led away, James looked out at the alien sky. Humanity had won, but he knew the real work was just beginning. They would have to build something better than the empire they had destroyed. They would have to prove they deserved their victory. 1 year after the highborn surrender, Earth hosted the first meeting of the new Galactic Alliance. The Great Hall in Geneva had been built specially for this moment, its ceiling a perfect replica of the star field visible from Mars' colony before its destruction, a reminder of what had been lost and what they were building in its memory. Captain James, now Admiral James, stood at the podium facing representatives from 50 different species. Some had been highborn victims like humanity. Others were former neutral worlds that had watched from the sidelines. All of them looked at Earth's representatives with new respect and perhaps a touch of fear. "We didn't want this power," James began, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "We didn't want to become the species that destroyed an empire. But the highborn gave us no choice. They pushed us to our breaking point. Now we all have to live with what came after." Commander Kate sat in the front row, her uniform displaying the new insignia of the Alliance Defense Force. The past year had been harder than the war in many ways. Building was always harder than destroying. The highborn ruled through fear and superior technology. James continued, "We won't make the same mistake. The Alliance will be built on cooperation, on mutual respect, on the understanding that every species has something to offer, whether they build ships that can cross galaxies or still travel by chemical rockets." A member of the winged singers rose, their feathered crest catching the light. "And who will guarantee this? Who will prevent another empire from rising?" "We all will," Kate answered, standing to join James. "Every member of the Alliance will have an equal vote. Every species will maintain its own defense force. No one will be allowed to build the kind of weapons the highborn created." The synthetic representative, Unit 7, moved forward. Their liquid metal form had become a familiar sight in galactic politics. "The network we created to defeat the highborn remains active, but now it serves all species, monitoring for signs of weapons development or aggressive expansion. Never again will one species be allowed to dominate others." James activated the main display, showing the Mars Memorial that now orbited the red planet. A massive station shaped like a ring, it housed survivors and refugees from across the galaxy, former enemies learning to live together, to build something new from the ashes of the old order. 1 year ago, humanity reached its breaking point, he said. "We showed the galaxy what happens when you push us too far. But that's not the lesson we want to be remembered for." He gestured to the hall, to the gathered representatives. "Look around. Former slaves and former masters. Species that once fought wars now working together. This is what we build when we move past hatred. This is what becomes possible when we remember our pain, but don't let it rule us." A highborn representative stood, one of the few allowed to participate in the new government. We underestimated humanity. Not just your weapons or your tactics. We underestimated your capacity for both justice and mercy. You could have destroyed us completely. We could have, Kate agreed. But then we would have become what we fought against. The true test of power isn't how you gain it. It's what you do with it afterward. The proceedings continued into the night. Treaties were signed. Agreements made. A new order taking shape, one careful step at a time. Later, James stood at the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Kate joined him, both of them silent for a long moment. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked finally, showing mercy to the highborn, including them in the alliance. James thought of Mars, of his lost family. The pain would never fully fade, but he thought also of the children he'd seen in the memorial station. Human children playing with highborn children, neither group knowing they were supposed to be enemies. "We did the human thing," he answered. "We fought when we had to, showed strength when strength was needed, but we also showed we could be better than our enemies, better than our pain." He touched the window, his fingers tracing the path to Mars. "They'll remember us as the species that broke an empire, but maybe they'll also remember us as the species that built something better in its place." Kate nodded, and together they watched the stars. The same stars that had seemed like a prison under highborn rule, now full of possibility again. Humanity had reached its breaking point, but they hadn't let it break their humanity.